preparation. This workshop, Sustainable Food Preparation, led by Seema Prasad, is presented by Tipple, which Paul was just mentioning, which is the Tennessee chapter of IPPL. Seema Prasad is the owner of the highly regarded Nashville restaurant Miel, where for the past 12 years, she has championed the use of sustainably grown food and wine and overall sustainable practices. The ethos she has built for Miel is based on sourcing products sustainably, employing ecologically sound systems, and focusing on a closed loop for resources. Over the past 9 years, her focus has expanded to include food waste and how Nashville as a city can divert this valuable resource from landfills and take advantage of its renewable qualities. The nonprofit Seema founded, Resource Capture, aka RECAP, aims to build a dry anaerobic digester for Nashville to process its food and organics waste into nutrient-rich compost and energy. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. This session will be recorded, and please stay muted throughout. And also, if you have any questions, the chat will be enabled. So please type in any questions you have, and we'll get to the questions at the end of Seema's presentation. Would you please welcome Seema Prasad?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mary Beth, for the introduction, and Paul and Aaron and everyone that has made this come to fruition, because this is a topic I am so passionate about and has become something that Nashvillians seem to really embrace in just this last decade, but even more so this last 3 years. And the more we know, the more we can act on it. If we don't know, as we were talking in the kind of pre-chat, if we don't know better, we can't do better. And the fact that everybody is tuning in this evening is really huge. It's really huge for our city and for our community overall. So a little bit about, like Mary Beth gave you my background professionally, but I'll tell you kind of where my interest in sustainability stemmed. And it was from being raised with every bit of our actions being focused on how it could be wise and good for the environment. So I grew up in Seattle, Washington, and I was raised by my parents, but my grandparents were a huge influence in my life, and they had grown up during the Depression. So of course they conserved everything. They watched, Mary Beth and I have talked before, my grandmother would save string and thread because you just didn't, you had it, you didn't have to pay for it again, but you conserved what you could so that you had it for the next day. And my grandmother grew a garden. She raised all of our food in a garden year round, which in Seattle you kind of can't. It's a little limited. We don't get to do tomatoes and things like we do here. But we were taught to compost absolutely everything and to turn it into the earth. And I knew what types of compost we needed for different parts of the garden. So we would get chicken manure from my great aunt Dorothy because she had chickens, and we would dry it on straw mats and then make a manure tea for the raspberries. We would get horse manure and turn it into the potato patch, and it was sandier, loamier soil. So we learned how to do these things so we cared for our earth, our little tiny plot of land that fed our family of 7 year round. And we composted everything. So I tell a story that, if I'd thrown a banana peel, which bananas were not as common because you had to buy those, but if I threw a banana peel in the trash, I would have gotten in so much more trouble than beating up my little brother. Like that would have been fine. You can beat him up, he'll be fine. But you threw the nutrients that go into the soil that feed our family in the trash, like how disrespectful and what disregard you have for the garden that feeds us. So it was ingrained into me at a very young age, and everything we did, even in the school that I went to, the elementary school, we composted. And this is, as a kindergartner, you're taught that this is not waste. This is something that feeds the soil that then, produces beautiful plants in our elementary school. So it was a cultural thing. This was very much a habit that you don't break as you get older, unless you get lazy, which is easy in modern day because things are not always set up to be convenient. So that's kind of where it stems from. And I started at a pretty early age, in my early 20s, owning restaurants. And at that point, you get to have a choice at every juncture of, do you want to order something from the big production manufacturer in the Central Valley of California? Do I want to get my greens from the Central Valley of California, or do I want to get them from the guy down the street? So you can look at the carbon footprint. You can also look at, and this is very selfish on my part, but I want the best tasting greens possible. I don't want ones that have had pesticides on them, herbicides. I don't want anything that's had to have any spray on it to preserve it. So I want the ones that are grown down the street, clipped that morning and brought to me. Or even better, the ones we're growing in the garden at Miel and the grounds, clipped and brought in right before service, and they've never even seen a refrigerator. So I want the best tasting and most nutritious if I can get it. And that happens to also correspond with having the lowest carbon footprint. So there are 3 criteria that we look at when we're talking about sustainable food. The first is environmental protection. What foods actually are protecting the environment in the way that they're grown. What foods are socially responsibly grown? I'm tripping over my words. Are we having fair wages? Are we having kind and healthy work environments? Is this a place where there's slave labor in the Central Valley of California, effectively, where people are not cared for and they're having heat stroke? Or is this a farm in Ashland City, Tennessee, where they're getting paid $15, $17, $18 an hour, and they're working reasonable hours, and they have good breaks, and they're hydrated? And I mean, it's very different working conditions. And then lastly, economic viability, which sometimes works very much in tandem with social responsibility when it's done correctly. So there are some business models that can be very socially responsible, but they don't quite make the cut for being economically viable, and vice versa. So when you have all 3 of those, the environmental protection, the social responsibility, and the economic viability, you've got something that's sustainable, and it's something that we can support. And that's what I look for when I'm sourcing product for the restaurant. So let's talk about the different kinds of products that we source. Produce, that's going to be the big easy one, right? We know that there are great farms around here, and the easiest way for you at home to enjoy great produce locally is to go to a farmer's market, get to know one in your neighborhood, and we have so many now in Nashville. We're very, very lucky. Or subscribe to a CSA. A CSA is community supported agriculture, which means you will have a subscription to a farmer or a farm group where they put together a basket for you, or a bag, each week, and you're eating what's in season and supporting a local farm. So what about that is incredibly, even like taking it to the next level, sustainable, is you're supporting your local economy, you are lessening the carbon footprint, and we're encouraging farmland in our environment to continue to be farmed. When we do that, we are enriching soil because they have to naturally, and we are keeping carbon in the soil. So overall climate is being managed that much better. So carbon sequestration is a whole separate hour-long talk easily, but the more that we have healthy soil, the more carbon is sequestered in the soil such that it's not being released into the atmosphere. It's a huge part of just building soil, builds good, healthy farms, builds a healthy climate. So the restaurant is right around the corner from Richland Park, Richland Farmers Market. And I can go there Saturday mornings and I can peruse everything, It's not the way the restaurant works. We get everything straight from the farmer, and we have to get earlier in the week so we can be prepared for Saturday. But I can go look at what's fun and what's in season right now. And that's a great market that's really quite large. Also, if you're on the west side of town, Green Door Gourmet has a huge variety of products, be it proteins to produce, that they will source from other local farms, not just their own. And you can go there weekdays, I believe, still. So not just a 1 day a week farmer's market. So produce that is sourced locally makes you eat seasonally, and it will support not just our local economy, but also our local environment, in that the soil is being cared for. And we enjoy carbon sequestration as a wonderful byproduct of that action. Now, produce is kind of the easy one, right? We're not going to always get tomatoes in the summer or in the winter. Sorry, we might just get them in the summer, even though there's some great hydroponics going on these days that are local. And so you learn to eat seasonally. But what's harder than that, because this does involve a little bit more of a carbon footprint, is going to be our proteins. So to have lamb, sheep, and goat, and beef cattle producers that are all very responsible in their practices. So we get our beef from Bear Creek Farm, which is just 45 minutes south of here, just south of Franklin, where it is those cattle are grazed, and they're corn finished, but they graze on land with the appropriate ratio of cattle to acre, so that they're not doing extra detriment or like extra harm to the land. And they're slaughtered on farm. So we've got a really safe, healthy kind of environment for the beef that we can procure. They do pork as well. And that comes in locally. We're not supporting a CAFO, so a large feedlot. And we're at the same time able to support, again, our local economy that is responsible. You can go to the farm and actually see the way that they raise these animals. As far as the seafood side of things, there is one resource that I will give you all that you just want to tag this on your internet kind of browser and always know to look for them. And actually, Aaron, if you want to pop that slide up now about the Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch. This is what most restaurants use, and it's what we use definitely to decide which seafood that we are going to entertain purchasing. So Monterey Bay is in Monterey, California, and it's where they have that really beautiful aquarium. But there's a not-for-profit called Seafood Watch that is operated there as a guide for us, for consumers, to which seafood is responsible and for us to purchase and what is sustainable. So a good example would be cod. I love cod. It's one of the favorite fish I grew up with. Pacific cod is sustainable. Atlantic cod is not. So the reason being is Pacific cod has not been overfished and Atlantic cod has. So we need to back off on our consumption to allow those fish populations to increase before we start harvesting those again. Now, there are some fish that are farmed, that are actually farmed well and are not hurting the environment. They're actually very good for us and good for the environment, and some that are not. And it's really hard to parse through all of that. And having a resource like Monterey Bay Seafood Watch is huge. They do all the research for you. They are the most credible in the world. I mean, they actually go outside of the United States. There's fish and seafood that is analyzed all over the world and from their site. And that is where I refer to before we purchase any seafood. So that's a really fun one and a great resource. So just Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch. Next, I would say in the realm of procuring food, we really deal with packaging. And packaging is probably one of the most challenging things that we're dealing with in our society today, because packaging can either be reusable, which would be amazing. So think of the glass bottles that we get our milk in. If we can reuse that, that's fabulous. That is ideal. Recyclable. So, sometimes, plastics are the kind of the lowest down the food chain that we really want to use, but recyclable, maybe a potato starch composite little cardboard carton, something that's truly recyclable, or at least, or not at least, but it hopefully maybe even compostable. Like my little cardboard cartons I put in my compost, and they kind of balance out my, apple peelings or potato peelings that are more of the organics waste. You need some of that woodsy waste so that you don't get the vermin, and it turns, and you've got both what they call brown and green waste in my compost bin. So packaging, one of the bigger issues that's going to come to light, I think probably more in the next few months, is single source packaging. And that means that a single like product packaging. So instead of plastic and cardboard, it would just be cardboard. So that when a person is trying to either recycle it or compost it, it's easy. And it's very clear on what to do. Because, like our envelopes that come in the mail that have the little plastic window in them, a lot of recyclers won't take those because they have the plastic window. So then that whole thing gets thrown out unless someone's going to carve out the plastic window. So it's another thing, just a single material packaging makes it a lot easier. I think we all know too that if we get bulk food, we're saving a lot on packaging. And I'll say I quite often will go over to either turnip truck or produce place and get my green lentils in a container that I am reusing. And they're okay with that. They're like, you're just putting it into your container that I go and wash at home, and then I put it back. So that's a huge part of it as well, because the impact of packaging on our environment in our food products is one of the largest impacts that it has, that packaging has. I mean, obviously we've all probably experienced a little more Amazon usage during COVID with all that cardboard coming to our homes. But, this packaging for food is something that we do every day. It's not a one-time purchase. It is an every day we are eating and purchasing new. Taking your own canvas bag to the grocery store, or shopping bags, another way to help eliminate the need for extra packaging and bagging. So when we talk more about compost kind of at the end, but that is, I mean, as you've heard, that is a huge topic for me as to what we can do personally to be very sustainable in our food production. Definitely called closing the loop. We can purchase locally and we can compost locally. And all of those nutrients, as well as those dollars, stay in our community. So is everyone ready to talk about the cooking part, the yummy part? All right, so cooking sustainably. We are all, I think, maybe from same faiths, different faiths. One thing we are taught in all faiths is that we need to be good stewards of the land, as we've been talking about, but also good stewards to our bodies. Like, we need to be eating a lot of vegetables. We need to put certain food products maybe in less rotation than maybe they are currently in our diets. I'm going to show a really fun slide right now, and this is the one that we really need to focus on. Is what is the carbon footprint of a bunch of these different foods, and then which ones can we focus on eating more, and how can we make them delicious? All right, Erin, the food carbon footprint, greenhouse gas emission slide. So if you look on this slide, we know exactly what that one is on the top. We don't even have to look. We know that is beef cattle. And that is herd cattle, not like what I'm talking about at Bear Creek Farm, just in Franklin, but large feedlot cattle production. If you look down further, dairy cattle is considerably further down that graph. Certain things that I really like are high, and I have to look at this graph to remind myself of where I need to be focusing my diet. So let's look at the bracketed area right at the bottom. This is kind of interesting. Cane sugar, I don't really eat a lot of sugar, but like cane sugar is lower. Ground nuts, so that's like peanuts, much lower. Wheat and rye is very low on a carbon footprint on the greenhouse gas emission. Tomatoes are lower. I wouldn't have thought. maize, just corn, cassava, soy milk, peas, which I love frozen peas. I don't know, fresh peas are great, but they're a lot to work with. Bananas, root vegetables, apples, citrus fruit, and nuts. So these are items that are just truly, they don't have a lot of greenhouse gas emission in their production and their transportation. Now, we can look in that center core before you get up to the really big ones, like coffee and chocolate that I don't want to know that are there, but they are. So what's in the center? Fish, farmed fish, eggs, rice. Wild caught fish is better than farmed fish. And that's truly, and I think it even says there, it's due to the fuel that is required for farming fish. So poultry and olive oil are right in there as well. It's just about making choices. So the more we're informed, again, the better choices we can make. And then we learn how to make those products that may not have been in our regular rotation a little more delicious. So I will tell you, there's a couple of things that are my kind of go-tos on how to make something delicious when I may or may not be excited about it otherwise. So we've spent some real good time during COVID doing this, working with children as well on Zoom, and a lot of like high schoolers on, okay, how are you gonna cook dinner? Because tonight you get to cook dinner, and I know you're only 16, but you can do this. So what is a good healthy way to enjoy root vegetables? So what we focused on was beets, because beets can sometimes be something you grew up with and that were not really prepared in a really tasty way. So I focused on golden beets. So you get golden beets, they're about the size of like a fist. So pretty good size. I would boil them. We boil them until they're soft through, let them cool, peel them after they've been boiled, just the peel should come off very, very easily. And then figure out what is the flavor profile we want for the sauce. Now we can go back to what is local at the moment. And just this last week, we had some dill pop back up. So I'm like, okay, we're going to put some fresh dill on it because that's actually in my garden in the back. I have cider vinegar always in the fridge, a little bit of salt and pepper. And then I tasted it and I stopped. I'm like, you know what? These beets came from Farmer Dave. He's in Bethpage, Tennessee. The dill came from my backyard. Salt and pepper just kind of in the pantry. And a little cider vinegar. And so the carbon footprint was so minimal and the nutrient load was high, and we had a delicious salad. So something very, very simple. The other one that we focused on was a sauce. How do you make sauces that are amazing, but not going to be heavily dairy focused? Because so often sauces can be, you know, if you go in the old French way, very cream or butter focused, which we know the cows that are required to make that definitely have a distinct carbon footprint. So what's an alternative to cream? I like using caramelized onions. So get a whole onion, or I'll even get 4 or 5 and make a big batch of this. Caramelize them in the oven. So just at a low heat. And I usually do it while I'm making something else. So chop them all up, little tiny bit of olive oil maybe on it, or not even, and seal it really tight. So the steam kind of from the onion breaking down kind of gets into it and doesn't allow it to dry out. And it'll start to slowly caramelize. I put that in the blender with Dijon mustard and lemon juice. That is super healthy for us. It's not having a high carbon footprint. It keeps in the fridge, and it's got the creaminess that I think we all crave in a cream sauce that is delicious, but definitely still not as good for us and has a high carbon footprint. So other food items that are actually very healthy. So I talked a little bit about green lentils, which are one of my favorite foods to eat and have a decently low carbon footprint. Legumes. So I will get 2 or 3 cups of French green lentils. They're really dark green. They're called depuis lentils because they stay firm when they're cooked. They don't fall apart into like a dal or like something that's very soupy. They'll stay firm. I'll cook those, drain them, and then they go with my seasonal root vegetables. So I had carrots that wintered over in the garden. So I had about a dozen little carrots that were super flavorful. an onion. I actually had spring onions that I just wanted to use, and olive oil. And I just caramelized the onions and the carrots in this olive oil, and a pretty good ratio of them to the lentils, like handfuls and handfuls of carrots, probably 4 or 5 cups, and 4 or 5 cups of onions to the 3 cups of cooked lentils. Caramelize those, toss them with the lentils. Then I put balsamic vinegar, salt and pepper, and a whole bunch of flat leaf parsley. Toss that all together, and you look at what the carbon footprint is, and it's almost nothing. The lentils are the highest amount of the carbon footprint, which are still very low. We have a high nutrient value. We have product that's been sourced locally, because you can get the onions and the carrots and the flat leaf parsley locally, mostly year round. And you've got something that will hold in the refrigerator for quite a while. I enjoy some brown butter on it, and it warmed up, honestly, but I don't need that by any means. It's delicious without it. It's great in the summer with maybe cherry tomatoes. If you have a bunch of tomatoes maybe growing on a patio, you'll easily be able to like toss other things into it, fresh spinach. But having those little items in a garden at your house will be the next step to having kind of a sustainable food lifestyle. So what is a sustainable food lifestyle? We talked about the CSA and just having the knowledge like the Monterey Bay Aquarium Watch can give you. But the next step is possibly doing some gardening yourself. And it's not all of us have a green thumb. It's not something exciting for all of us. But I will say, if you have children or grandchildren in your life, it is always something exciting for them. And it ends up being, if it's not even fun for you, it ends up being fun when you get to see their faces light up. Back to when children are exposed to things like this from an early age, it sticks as a habit. And it becomes something they don't have to think is a chore at all. They do it as second nature. And that could be as simple as planting a tomato plant on a pot on the porch, or composting the leftovers of anything, be it the leftovers of a meal that maybe didn't get finished completely, the potato peelings, the banana peel, the apple core. Now, composting can be done at home in a backyard, but honestly, it's smelly sometimes in a backyard compost, and you can't put everything in it. You can't really put your dairy and your meat in it in the backyard. So we also have a great service called Compost Nashville, and he will come pick it up. It's a 5-gallon bucket, and I think it's $20 a month, but he'll come pick it up, and it will be composted in a large-scale composting facility where they know what they're doing and they keep everything clean. So the sustainable food lifestyle. I'll go back to herbs in your kitchen. I think there's a few things that are very financially wise, because if you've purchased herbs at the grocery store, which I had to do once, and I just shook my head that I couldn't believe I was doing this. I could feel my grandmother like on my shoulder looking at me like, you're absurd and I can't believe you're doing this. But I had to pay $3 for a little tiny thing of tarragon. It's expensive. We have a plastic package around it, and it's something you can easily grow at home in a little terracotta pot on your windowsill. So certain herbs at home, if you're going to use them a lot, like I have probably 10 bunches of flat leaf parsley always growing, so I can clip what I need and then it grows again, and I clip what I need, are so much better. It's fresh, it's in your backyard, you save money, and you save the carbon footprint of them growing herbs, shipping it in a plastic container to a grocery store. So that's probably my first, if you want to get into cooking a little bit more at home, using fresh herbs are a great way to do it, to make healthy meals. And it's a great money saving opportunity, as well as definitely lessening the overall carbon footprint of food production. How about, let's talk a little, was that good for cooking stuff, or do you guys want more cooking like talk? Because we can talk food and food production all day. I love having greens. I'll say that actually, salad greens in your garden. And you can put them in a container where you can move them around, because their roots don't need to be very deep, because certain times of the year they're in a really sunny area, then they don't need to be in a sunny area when it gets warmer outside. Salad greens that you can cut and have every day. Think of when you get the big container, it says Tantamura from the grocery store, of all those great, beautiful mixed salad greens. Where do they come from? Central Valley of California. So they're shipped all the way from California here. They have preservatives on them. They've been dried. Or you could go to your backyard or a little pot on a porch and cut your salad greens. I have a dear friend, single woman that has a nice little porch garden, and she has vowed from May to October every year to only eat from her garden or friends' gardens, like we'll trade things. And she has salad greens and herbs up there, tomatoes, and then she has a little backyard garden, but she eats those every day. And it's the easiest thing. When I'm like, there's no way you can produce enough in those little containers. And when you're clipping them regularly, it instigates more growth. And she was able to, this last May through October, eat purely from her garden. So, and even gave some to me for lunch one day. So it was, it is very doable and really satisfying to eat something that you grew and that is so fresh and so much more nutritious than something you're going to purchase in a grocery store. All right, let's talk a little bit about packaging your food, your containers. So we all know that Ziplocs are not optimal. They are, a couple uses maybe, and then we have to throw them away, and they don't recycle well. And so they're really not what we're looking for. Plastic, like little deli containers, not bad because we can reuse them many times, and they are recyclable, but they're also plastic. I don't know if did anyone here grow up having milk from the glass bottle and then someone gave them something in a plastic jug? I remember looking at my grandmother was like really thinking this was the coolest newfangled thing ever, that milk was in a plastic jug. And I looked over at my mom and I'm like, I don't have to drink this, do I? I just like, please don't make me, like, this smells funny. It tastes funny. I think we've all probably gotten used to it much more now, but glass preserves the flavor. Plastic inserts flavor, especially if you've had any heat interaction. If we use glass, we can reuse it. We can wash it and reuse it. Plastic has to go to be recycled. So first, we always want to reduce. Second, we would like to reuse. And third, we'd like to recycle or compost. So if we have containers, food storage containers, that we can constantly reuse instead of recycle, all the better. So Erin, there's a photograph that I had of just some fun things that I have in my kitchen, that this is what I use on a regular basis. Instead of using cellophane or like saran wrap, there's this really great beeswax wrap paper. Feels a little bit like a canvas that I can cover containers with. And then I can wash it, let it dry, and use it again. So I don't have to use cellophane. It's wonderful. And it smells like a little like beeswax, so it's really pleasant instead of plastic. A glass container with the lid that you can take and use. You can freeze it, and you can put it in the oven even, because it's Pyrex. With the lid, I can then wash it and reuse it. Wonderful way to live a little more sustainably and not have that waste come from your kitchen. In the back, and I can hear it operating right now, it's sucking more air out, is called a Vacuvita. And the Vacuvita keeps bread, chips, tortillas, anything that you would like. It's like a bread box. Anything that you would like to really extend the shelf life on, in this vacuum sealed container for, I've had corn chips that I've opened and they've been in there 3 weeks because I went on vacation, or not really vacation. I started working too much. I went on a mental vacation from preparing food at home, and they were perfectly good 3 weeks later. So just prolonging the shelf life of something through not using chemicals, not using, anything that would be poor for us, for our health. Yes, I see Anna saying, make sure you hand wash the beeswax wraps only. Correct. You do not want to put those in the dishwasher. They will melt and then ruin your dishwasher as well. But so these are 3 different ideas of how you can preserve your food, store it, and do it in a really responsible manner, so that we're not wasting food, and we're also not contributing further to environmental impact with waste. Trying to watch my time a little bit. I want to talk just a little bit about composting. And this is just because this is one of those things that as I knew more, I was amazed what we could do and the simple actions that we could employ in our lives and have such a great impact. So 30% of the waste that we produce in Metro Nashville is organics. About 23% of that is food waste that is currently going to the landfill. When food waste goes to the landfill, it decomposes because the landfill is anaerobic. It then releases methane and carbon dioxide, which are two hugely impactful greenhouse gases into our atmosphere. If we were to backyard compost and eliminate our waste stream, from our organics waste stream from going to the landfill, residentially, we could manage so much of that. It is very, very, very easy. It's easy to backyard compost, but also if you don't want to do it, there's Compost Nashville for very low cost, honestly, for a 5-gallon bucket. For the fact that they give you a clean bucket each time, you don't have to clean it up, which is never anyone's favorite task in the restaurant. You take the compost bucket, you throw it in, you bring it back, it's smelly, you scrape it out, but you know, Compost Nashville deals with all of that for you. So food waste, food scraps that go to the landfill, one thing that we can all take on and manage from our end so much easier. Also, when food scraps go to a composter, they're then turned into nutrient-rich soil that can go back to farms and they can feed our soil. So back to the original topic of carbon sequestration and responsibility of keeping those nutrients in our community and closing that loop, both economically and the nutrient load are kept here. Composting, I think the biggest thing for me is it feeds the soil. We're getting back to feeding our farms and our communities. And when we do that, we encourage a stronger farming community. And we also we can easily encourage our neighbors when they see what we're doing. And if you have a compost bin, you see that black dirt that comes out when you've finished that compost and how well it feeds your plants without you having to go purchase anything from the store. Let's just open it up to questions, because I know at this point there's probably more than I can then answer sometimes in the amount of time that we have left, and I want to be respectful of your time. Erin or Mary Beth, are you going to ask me those, or should I look in the chat?
I do have one question. Yeah, I was going to say, I think I have one question from Kay. Kay asked if the recipe that you mentioned with the creamy caramelized onions could be reshared either in the chat or verbally.
Sure. Well, I can do it verbally really quick. I usually take 5 onions and I take like a 9x13 Pyrex and I chop them all up. And these are like medium-sized onions, not big jumping ones. And I will have a lid for my Pyrex that seals in the oven. It's not the plasticky one. It's an old metal one. So I got it from my grandmother, and I don't think they make them anymore, but you can use tin foil, which I try not to use. But if you use it like 20 times at least before you wash and recycle it. But you can also put it just as a sealed container in the oven at about 300 degrees and just let it caramelize. I will take it out every maybe half hour, 40 minutes, and stir it so those onions get caramelized. Leave the juices in. Put all of that in a blender or a Vitamix with, I'll do I like Dijon mustard a lot. So I'll put about a cup of Dijon mustard in and the juice of a lemon. That's it. And it is a phenomenal sauce that feels like this really decadent, luxurious French sauce, and it's completely healthy and it holds in the refrigerator. Great on green beans, great on roasted broccoli. I actually even like it with beets and rutabagas and stuff like that have been roasted in the oven, but super low carbon footprint and really tasty.
We have some other questions here. Any specific, Ann Olson is asking, any specific recommendations on local sources for eggs and chicken?
Yes. So Wedge Oak Farm, which is in Lebanon, Tennessee, and is owned by Karen Overton. probably has the most responsibly raised eggs and chicken around. You will also see eggs that come in from a producer in Kentucky called Egg Shack. And it is a very clean and well-operated facility that's just over the border. Egg Shack has great eggs. They're beautiful orange yolks. They're amazing. You will also see chickens. If you go to, what is it called? Bare Bones Butcher on 51st in the Nations, you will see eggs and chicken from Jolly Barnyard. And Jolly Barnyard is Sam, and he is Sam Yoder. He is ex-Amish, and he produces everything in a very responsible manner. Now, these chickens are a breed that I don't get really excited about because they've been bred purely for their meat, and the breasts are really huge and the legs are really tiny. I mean, that's just the breed that the Cornish cross that we all usually get for like a roasting chicken. But he does raise them in a very humane manner and in a very responsible manner for the environment.
Okay. How did you choose the name Miel? Honey in Spanish. I thought it was honey in French, but maybe it's both for your restaurant.
So you are correct, it is both, as well as very close in Italian. Those are the three food cultures that we draw from. But Miel has a really huge, very significant food history. Honey is by far the most written about food product in every culture throughout history. It's been traded like gold. It is the most traded and sold food product in all food writing throughout time. It would be buried with our dead. You look into the tombs and the catacombs and the pyramids even, and they would be buried with honey. And that honey, when you exhume it 2,000 years later, still has its nutrient value. You melt it and it's still full of nutrients and archaeologically interesting. Like if there's a fly in it or something, you really get to see it because it's completely preserved. But honey is just this magical ingredient. I mean, it is very much the product of pollination, which is the start of all foods being produced. So it was very symbolic. And Miel instead of Honig, the German word for honey, Honig, not so pretty. But we don't really draw from German food culture. But Miel is the name for honey in the three food cultures that we really draw from for the restaurant.
Okay. That's a question that I wanted answered anyway, so thank you. Francis Duval is asking, do you have vegetarian, vegan dishes in your restaurant? And she apologizes for not knowing the name of your restaurant, but I think at this point she does.
I think you know now, yeah.
Right.
So, yes, we do have vegetarian and vegan dishes at the restaurant, and it's very important to me that we always do. Servers are very well versed in what the ingredients in each dish, so that, for example, if you need to eat gluten-free, if you have celiac disease or a gluten sensitivity, you'll know whether there's gluten in it, and that could be as simple as a little bit of soy in a dressing or seasoning, because soy has gluten. Also, our chef, Jason Leacona, he was telling me about this wonderful experience he had. He had this wonderful woman in his life for years that was vegetarian. And I looked at him like, oh, was that hard as a chef? Because all you chefs seem to just like to cook meat. And he looked at me, he's like, absolutely not. It was such a great experience. I learned so much. He's like, are you kidding? He goes, I just want vegetarians and vegans to come in here so that they can know that we can prepare something just as delicious for them. And we do. If you come in and you're vegan, there might be 2 or 3 things on the menu, but you just say, hey, these are the foods I enjoy. These are the foods that I'm not excited about. And he'll make something phenomenal for you. Oh. And that's when we did this that Saturday night. And I remember the young woman just looking at me saying, you're really sure this doesn't have any dairy in it? I'm like, yeah, I promise you. It has the onion puree with the Dijon and the lemon juice, but, and it's delicious. And it doesn't have to be full of meat to be delicious by any means. So yeah, happy to.
Anne Ursulan, I hope I'm saying that correctly, says it wants to know if you're making any progress on your anaerobic digester idea.
I am actually. And I think what we've learned, because I started the anaerobic digester project 9 years ago, last month. So it's been a while. And one thing we've learned is that we need to educate. We need to educate the community on what it is and why it's valuable. So instead of building a large digester as our next step, I'm looking to purchase a micro digester, and it's the size of a shipping container. And it would be a proof of concept for Nashville to see and smell, or really not smell because it's completely sealed so you don't smell it. And that would be something that all the donors that have committed to this are all kind of recircling right now so that we can get the funds approved for that project versus the large project and kind of divert those to the pivot that we've done. And we would hopefully be online by the end of the year or first quarter of 2022 with a micro digester for show and tell for the community where everybody can come and see it. So there's so much that we could talk about with the micro digester, but the exciting thing is our backers are still behind us. We want to educate and we want to move forward with this as a proof of concept to get the decision makers in the city to also be behind it so that we can work as a public-private partnership and not just a private entity.
Great. Shalini is asking, I think I said that right, Shalini. Are restaurants working with Metro government alongside for their zero waste plan?
You know, in some instances, yes. The mayor has put forward the Food Saver Challenge, which gives us all a list of items that we can take on to be better stewards of food. Now, Food Saver is going to be reduce, reuse, recycle. So what are the practices that we can adopt that are going to be better for our community? And they challenge us to do that for, I think it's a 3 or 6 month period. We're doing all of them at Miel right now, so I don't really jump onto it again. But reducing, it recommends to restaurants, reduce portion sizes. Don't have such a huge portion that people would never eat that much, and have a more reasonable portion so that they can finish it, or at least have really good takeaway packaging so you can encourage them to eat the rest of it at home and not throw it away. Reuse, taking that food home, and then recycle, making sure that restaurants are encouraged to compost. Now, of course, during COVID, everyone really had to tighten their belts in the hospitality, industry. So I think some of those things went by the wayside, hopefully just for a short time, and they're coming back online. But Mayor Cooper's been a huge proponent for food waste management and a huge proponent for the digester to come online.
Oh, that's great. Any more questions, folks? I think I read out all the ones that were raised. Have I missed anybody? I think that's it then. Is there anything further that you want to impart, Seema? This has been so wonderful, but if you have more wonderful things to say, we're all ears.
Thank you. But I think the one thing that I've learned through being very involved in more the public realm of sustainability, not just in my personal life for about the last 25, 30 years, is that the more we know, the more we can act on. If we know that putting an apple core in the trash versus the compost is really not the best thing to do, putting it in the compost does wonderful things, putting it in the trash does bad things. If we know that, then we can make better decisions. And if we can educate our friends that it's something we can show them through our actions, then they ask the questions and they know as well. The more we know, the more we can do. So I thank you all for actually tuning in today, because this means that you care to know. And when we care to know, then we care to do. And that's the exciting thing for our community, that we all want to do better, and we want this place that we live in, this community that we care about, to be as good as it can be. So we're all here to learn more and to do better. And Thank you.
Thank you so much, Seema. We're going to, for your friends and relatives, I know a couple people mentioned this, who were not able to Zoom in at this particular time, still want to hear this. We are going to be sending out a recording, and it's going to also include all the resources that were mentioned in case you didn't see them in the chat, or we didn't write them down fast enough, to tell you the truth. So we're going to send all that out to you, and getting a lot of very nice thank yous if you want to tune into that.
Oh, you're sweet. Oh,
to the chat.
McIntyre. Wow. Yeah, I recognize many names here. Yes.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, this is great. I just appreciate everyone caring. This gives me fuel to keep going. This is exciting. So thank you.
You're very welcome, and thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
And special thanks to Erin for hosting too.
And to Paul, thank you for leading.
Yeah.
Paul, thank you for leading this. It takes someone stepping up and doing that. So thank you. Yeah.